Hey there, this is Emily and Bernie from Third Place Works, where we help co-working professionals with tailored cohorts and one-on-one consulting. Our proven frameworks can help you get focused, stay accountable, and see real results. Want to learn more? Check out the show notes for all the details on how to join us and take your co-working business to the next level.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another Co-working Values podcast. And in the studio today is possibly my evil twin, Phil Szomszor. So, Phil, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for, sir?
I feel like I need to do like an evil twins dark laugh when you introduce me there, Bernie, but I'm not going to. I'm Phil Szomszor. I am a LinkedIn consultant and comms guy. I've been doing PR and marketing for many, many years, and I run my own business with my wife called Brightside Digital Engagement.
Is your wife called Brightside Digital Engagement?
Well, she's not called Szomszor. She's Jo Jameson, so she didn't want the Szomszor name. But yeah, we're Mr. and Mrs. Brightside, I suppose.
So we want to. I'm tempted to talk about ironing, but we can get to that later. But I'll leave you hanging, folks. I saw your post on LinkedIn on the Edelman Trust Barometer, and it caught my attention. And I mean, I think most people listening to this would agree at some level, like trust's really important in business and society and stuff like that. But like, what got your attention for that, and why do you pay attention to that trust barometer?
Yeah, well, Edelman's been doing the Trust Barometer for donkey's years, and it's kind of regarded as one of the staples in the PR and marketing and CEO calendar to have a look and see how society globally is feeling about trust. And the idea being that leadership institutions need to create more trust within amongst their audiences. And Edelman has a bit of just sort of caveats on, has a bit of a reputation, should we say. Not everybody loves the Trust Barometer. Some of Edelman's business practices get criticised, and the methodology of the Trust Barometer is sometimes criticised. So I don't always read it, page end to end. But this year I did take a look because the headlines seem to mirror a bit of a worldview that, or a feeling that I've been having for the last couple of years around trust. And usually they show that, on the whole, people exhibit quite strong levels of trust towards CEOs and of large organizations, much more so than government. And areas like scientists, we tend to trust more than the media, that kind of stuff. But the big finding this year is that trust across the board has dropped quite a bit. So, and not only is trust dropping, but a lot of people feel that these institutions are actually lying to us. So, 68% or higher. The number of people that feel like we're being lied to is increasing by heaps, and we're not trusting our employers so much. We've got grievances against the government, business, and rich. People feel like the dice is loaded against them. There's this thing around hostile activism. So people feeling that it's actually quite acceptable to take part in hostile activism, particularly amongst the younger generations, and also sort of fears around discrimination at an all-time high, and prejudice, whether that's discrimination around race or gender, sexual orientation, all of those things is increasing as well. So that's the perception that people are having. I think you could, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, Bernie, so I think I'll just say it softly. People are really, really fed up. And across the board.
I know the word you were going to use.
Yes. Well, there are many words I could use, but yeah, fed up is probably putting it lightly.
So, I've got like 50 questions on what segment of society is eating this fruit to make them feel like this. But the thing, as I was listening to that, is just before we came on, we were like talking about what we're going to talk about, and you said when you meet people in your local area and you have to look them in the eye, that is very different from taking them out online. And one of the things we talk about a lot here, and is in that whole, the episodes with Tony and John about citizenship is like that local connection is really, really important. And that's the role that we keep advocating about, the role a co-working space can play in the local community. And you don't have to be a member of that co-working space for it to be, to take part in it. But what are your thoughts as someone that lives not in the middle of a sprawling metropolis, and you used to come into town, and like when you take what you just said there, how could you practice anti that in your everyday life?
Well, I think one of the conclusions that I had from the report and the sort of dialogue I've had with people afterwards is that it's really easy to get caught up and consumed by the mega drama that's happening in the world. I mean, we all know what it is, and we all know what I'm referring to, whether it's politics or social media or just people general anger levels or lack of trust in what they're reading on websites and in newspapers and so on. And I think you can get really caught up in the doom scrolling and all the rest of it. And most of that stuff is not going to directly affect us. Trump going off on one is not going to directly affect me today. It does affect things, it does affect the tone and affect us more generally in society. But what he's doing, what he says about Greenland or what he's saying about the Ukraine, awful as it is, isn't affecting me. I think you can get really caught up in things that are outside of your control. And what is inside your control is what's happening in your backyard. And it has made me sort of reevaluate a little bit about perhaps not being quite so hooked to the newsline and spend a little bit more time thinking more locally. And obviously that's going to be within your local communities, outside of your working practices, and it will certainly be within your working practices how you can just sort of spend more time with people that you're with. And I think, to your point just now about trusting people you can eyeball, if you've spent some time with people, you're building trust. It's all of that sort of brain chemistry stuff and oxytocin and all the rest of it. You're building those bonds that it's very difficult to do online. So I think that's sort of how I would join those two things together.
I think there's another huge, there's things, there's views and stands I have on different, political and social situations. And when I'm actually sitting in a room with someone who has I met someone I didn't know via someone else the other day, and the circumstance they'd been in was like a circumstance I've never been in, but it was the completely opposite of what I was advocating for that particular situation. And as you can see, I'm definitely don't want to say which one it was, but it was really good to meet them, even though I didn't agree with their stance on this thing, because it made it real. Whereas that topic is all the time in the headlines. And there's something massive about talking to someone face to face in a constructive conversation rather than just hammering them online or getting upset by it.
Yeah, I mean the culture wars stuff and how that is just breeds like a horrible disease on social networks. Even places like LinkedIn, where I spend my time, is exhausting and horrible because it just using the brain chemistry thing again, it's like cortisol running through your system when you see that stuff, and people get very, very angry. There was a case, I don't know if you've seen this one, that was on LinkedIn yesterday or the day before, where a guy, I won't say his name, I won't give him the oxygen, but a guy put out a very inappropriate post making a comparison between a woman's chest size and marketing. And it was basically, I mean, it was like marketing in the Carry On film era. I mean, it was just like, what are you? I didn't even understand the point he was making. And I had a look at this, and it was interesting watching it through the day. By the end of the day, there were 2,600 comments, most of which calling him out for being, a bit of an idiot, put it lightly. and saying it's got no place and calling back. And I can, my wife and I discussed this, and she says you've got to call these people out. You can't let it lie. It's not acceptable. But at the time I looked at this, there were 650 odd likes on there. So no, 950 odd likes in there, beg your pardon. And I don't think if you're going to call somebody out, you're not going to then give it a love heart or a like, are you? So I think it's fair to say that 950 people actually agreed with him, even if they were sort of doing it a little bit more quietly than writing a supportive comment. And this is the point, isn't it? It just sort of breeds this kind of, creates this these warring sides and online. Whereas if you actually have a sensible conversation with somebody face to face, and I'm sure, I'd really like to think, there's no way that guy would say something like that in an office today. Maybe he would, but it's a lot more difficult too. So yeah, I'm all for getting people face to face.
When because this trust thing is, do you know Marcus Sheridan?
I know the name. Go on.
The pool guy.
Oh yeah.
He, like, one of his, is always on about, in a very constructive way about how trust is this, it's just so important when you're running a business, and all the predictable reasons that people would say about trust in a business. But how would you do that online? Because when I'm meeting you face to face, that's one thing. But, since you and I met in like 2010, dancing about on Twitter, like, online is a very different beast. And if I'm trying to talk, and in the context of, like, if I'm trying to, I don't want to say market my co-working space, but like communicate my co-working space, and I want to build that kind of face-to-face trust element, how would you recommend I do that?
Well, the first thing I think is doing it with on LinkedIn, is doing it with your personal account rather than just your company page account, because people trust people more than faceless page accounts. I think the page account should just be announcing when your next event is and that kind of stuff. So more sort of transactional type things. And if you're doing it as an individual, I think there are some sort of techniques that you can apply around using stuff like video more. So you're more likely to trust someone if you can see their face and hear their voice, whether that's putting out, and you put out videos all the time, whether it's putting out little video clips or doing LinkedIn lives or those kind of things. So using video can help. If one feels like you can do video, then lots and lots of comments help. So commenting on other people's stuff in a supportive, constructive way, asking questions, answering questions, introducing people, connecting the dots, saying, oh yeah, I saw this, Bernie, you might be interested in this person, that kind of thing. And also trying not to play the game too much in terms of expanding your network to the nth degree so that you've got a gazillion connections. Because, it doesn't matter. It's just an ego trip. And secondly, it's impossible to have proper networks within massive 10s, 20, 30,000 people. You're just broadcasting. So that doesn't, that's harder to build up genuine trust. To keep the network reasonably tight, invest your time in supporting those people within your network, not just broadcasting, and try and use things like video if you can, just to show more of yourself.
That is one of my favorite things about the social nowadays, because there's people I take my lead from are saying follow no one cares about follow account anymore, and there are people obviously that do care about that. But I remember when if I met someone who had 10,000 followers on Twitter in 2013, I was in absolute awe. And now I know people like Beyonce have got like 100 million or something. I don't know, like it's just ridiculous. So but what do you think's changed that? Is it the algorithms, or is it like a human connection? Because like I have less people paying attention, but I have much stronger connections with those fewer people, and I'm just much happier with my online environment nowadays, because I don't subscribe to any news channels.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably doing it right if that's the case, in my opinion. I mean, there are certainly plenty of people out there that are still chasing the numbers and boasting about it and all the rest of it. But there are also a lot of those people are cheating. So they are using automation systems and signing up to what's called an engagement pod, where you agree to comment on a set number of stuff in exchange for people commenting on yours. Most of those people won't even know you. And a lot of these people end up getting 10, 20, 30, 40,000 followers on LinkedIn, which, if you think about it, unless you've got a really good reason to have that many people following you, like you're a famous author, or you run a multinational business, or you're a journalist or something like that, you've already got a presence in the wider world. Why would somebody like you or me have 50,000 followers on LinkedIn? Like, there's no reason for that unless you're gaming the system. So I think there are still people out there doing that, but whether it has as much truck as it used to, I don't know. I'd like to think it's less valuable. I mean, there are some sort of quirky things going on LinkedIn at the moment. I don't think the algorithm's necessarily serving people in the best way, but they are always changing things and responding to what people want. So I'm hopeful that that's continuing. But I think the thing around LinkedIn for me, and this is one of my learnings from the last year, where last year I didn't actually go out a great deal. I work in a garden office with my wife, and got to this sort of more towards the end of the year and realized we hadn't really been getting out very much, meeting people. So this year, particularly, and the end of last year, particularly this year, been making a bit more of an effort. And I think it's the piece around joining up the in real life activities with digital. So you meet somebody for a coffee or something like that, and then the relationship that you have with them online is so much richer because you've had the conversation in real life. And it's joining those kind of things. And I think that's really where the trust comes, because you recall the conversations, and they're more likely to be in your mind over a longer period of time. So I think doing that sort of mix of on and offline is really powerful.
It is. There was I don't want to say a report. It was like a really good read. Like in 2020, Gareth and Mandy, who run Town Square, which is a co-working space company that goes very local, and they produced this report called "What If Everybody Could Walk to Work?" And they'd had this campaign called Boot the Commute, which was about encouraging people to, work in their, not commute into London every day, or wherever they need to do. And then, as that was in 2020, and then what in the whole back to the office conversation, what turned out is that people don't, generally speaking, people don't mind being in an office and seeing people. It's not the office they hate, because they like going there. There's a lot of good reasons to be in a space. It's the, mind-numbing hour and a half commute and battling train prices and everything like that. It's like completely dead time. And a lot of the stuff in that report was, around when we stay in our local area, we get to, you're more likely to have an on and offline interaction with someone in your local area, get to find out running clubs and sports clubs and cafes and, whatever else is going on. And then trust goes up in that local area, and it becomes a safer environment. And, I think trust, I'm going to say a feel, because I haven't researched it like a, statistician, but, trust in a local area is when there's trust in, so I lost myself there, if everyone's local area had a very high trust, that would, I hope, impact the world overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that really speaks to me personally, because we started our business in 2020. Obviously, we had all the pandemic and stuff like that, but I wanted to stop commuting to London and all that stuff that you've just described, and the rat race element of it. And we built our little garden office, and we're quite happy to be in here, and we still go into London to meet people, which isn't that far away. It's only about half an hour away, but we're still missing something. And what both of us have tried to do a lot more is just invest in our local communities, not from a new business point of view, just from a brain health point of view, mental health point of view, and feeling part of something. So I started coaching. I started a team, an under-8s team. My boy couldn't get into a team because there's so much competition around here. So the only solution seemed to be start your own under-8s team. I have no coaching experience. I've never played football to a particularly high standard, so it's been a journey. But it's been such a good thing, because not only does it get me more into the local community, it's sort of a little bit broader as well. So you can find yourself just hanging around the same kind of people that you are at the pub or whatever, which I do. But it actually gets you into other parts of the local community, kids from other schools, and meeting people and doing something that takes me right out of my comfort zone as well. So there's so many advantages to that. And I wanted to do something like that for a while. I was thinking about becoming a scout leader or something, because I used to do that when I was younger. But it's really hard when you're putting all those hours into just commuting. It was just off the table. And a lot of the other parents that would love to get involved in the football team just can't, because they're on a train when we're doing training. So there's upsides in all sorts of ways.
There's so where we live here, there's 2 cafes opposite, and I've never really. I had this when I lived in Camden 100 years ago, and I lived on Brick Lane in 2000. So you'd go down, you go down to the cafes and pubs and bump into people there. And then when we lived in sunny Ilford, that wasn't really available. But it's like, I'll finish this now and I'll go downstairs and there'll be people in the cafe opposite, and we just start talking to them. And I haven't had that for a long time, because we have to walk a long way to get to that type of cafe. And it is, I don't know, I just really enjoy that kind of very, very local random interaction. There's a huge luxury to it.
Yeah, and I don't think in suburban UK we've got that. I mean, we haven't got that here where I am, in a sort of dormitory town, stroke village in Hertfordshire. There is a pub, but there's no sort of convening point. I imagine on this street there are a bunch of people exactly the same as me, sat in their garden offices. So there's still quite a long way to go to create some of those local vibes. And there is a great thrust to get people back at the return to office that large organisations are doing. But there is still plenty of people at home that could be in local co-working spaces, doing what you're talking about, or opportunities for cafes to flourish or things like that. But people have just got to leave the front door.
So what I meant to ask you about this about 10 minutes ago. What would if I was a we'll end on this. Like, if I was a co-working space owner, what would I have to do to get you out of your garden office? Because I feel there's so many people that listen to this, and I have this conversation. Actually, people say, I was talking to a space owner the other day. I actually, talk to people a lot about this. They're like, I just can't reach people in my local area. And when you said there's loads of people sitting in their garden offices, I'm sure there is. And how would I get you to leave your refuge and come to my space?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think it depends the answer depends a bit upon what the objective is. So is the objective to make the co-working space busier, more vibrant, more interesting? Or is it a commercial objective to get me to pay money to to join that co-working space? So I'll just leave the question hanging for a second and we'll come back to it. But one of the things that I've been doing more recently is trying to get out and meet old contacts, not necessarily to win business off them or to try to get referrals, but just to spend time with people to get the pulse of the nation, to share ideas, and often that will lead to something good. And a lot of these people are based in co-working spaces. So last week I met 3 people in 3 different co-working spaces. The first was the Conduit, which is in Soho area, then went to Arboretum, which is near Charing Cross, and then went to one of the Soho House places just along the road on the Strand. Very different vibe, and I know people will have views on each of those co-working spaces. But for each of them, actually for 2 of them, not Soho House, not surprisingly perhaps, but for 2 of them, the people were saying that had got their residency there was going, you know what, you can come here anytime, Phil, and hang out, and we can sit next to each other and we can work together, or you can just use the space and have a coffee and work here because I'm a member. I can bring guests in, and they've left that open to me. So somebody that comes into London a bit, it's like, actually that's really valuable. So I will go back and see Jess or Tony in one of those two places and spend time with them. And I've been doing that with Tony for the Arboretum co-working space for a little while now. I'm always made feel welcome, get a decent cup of tea with proper tea leaves, all the rest of it. I really like spending time there. So that makes that increases the footfall, and I'm buying drinks and all the rest of it. But I'm not at the point necessarily where I'm thinking, okay, I'll actually take my own membership out, because the economics have got to work for me in a way that, I'm not going to spend the 500,000, 2,000, whatever the rate is of that particular co-working space every year, because I'm only going in once every couple of weeks. So it's finding a way to make the commercials work, both for the co-working space and for me. So whether that's buying a set number of tickets that you could use over a year, that might work, or just finding a mechanism that works for me so that I can use it on my terms. So I think there's a sort of commercial aspect to it. But in terms of marketing it, I would use your members as the best. Word of mouth works better than any other form of marketing. We all know that. So use the members and encourage the members to get guests in. And if there's events that those guests could perhaps participate in or present at, then that would also increase the propensity of them joining those networks.
Yeah, when you were talking about coming into London there, knowing you're going to go in and in between things be able to sit somewhere and concentrate is so valuable. It's like what popped in my head there is that it's not about obviously if someone says it's £100 to sit here, you're not going to do it, but being hosted, that happens to me a lot, because I've one of the massive luxuries I've got after hanging around London so long is I've always got somewhere to go, and there's not a slimy cafe. I've always got a co-working space to go to and pop open my laptop and get working and can concentrate and everyone just get into that little groove, and you don't have to go in and play some little trying to get in the door thing. It's just sit down and get on with it. How you said you can either sit over here or sit with us. It's so valuable.
Yeah, and it's nice when you've got a mate there as well, though. So I think the co-working spaces I've liked visiting more is when I've know the people there. In fact, the Conduit is one where there's actually it was the second time I'd been there within a month, because another client has also taken out a membership there. So it's like, oh, okay, I'll go and have a word with Johnny now because he's also here, and then it kind of makes me feel, fosters a little bit more of sort of good feeling about hanging out there, and it not feeling like an airport lounge, but actually feeling like not quite a second home, but somewhere that you feel comfortable to be in, and not feeling like you're an imposter. And I think that's often you're made to feel like you shouldn't be somewhere. Generally, not just co-working spaces, but in all kinds of forms of life. So if you can make people feel like it's their kind of place, and we were talking about this before about the different feelings of those three co-working spaces. Now, some of them are going to really appeal to a certain type of person. I know which one of those three I felt most comfortable in, but that's not to say to me that those other co-working spaces are bad places. They're just not aimed at me, the way that I think and I want to interact with people. So I think that's also okay. I think the challenge is also the local ones. I kind of didn't really answer your question fully, because I was talking about when I'm going in somewhere. So if there was a co-working space in Welwyn Garden City, how could it get me there? And I think that's a harder challenge, but there are plenty of people that haven't got the luxury of a garden office, that are just still working on their kitchen tables, and it's not good for them, on a number of levels. So I think there is still a market there to be exploited for those people, and I think a lot of it is actually for them just about awareness and making it possible, and perhaps targeting companies to make it easier for people to work from those locations. Large organizations could be making it easy for people to work at co-working spaces rather than forcing them to travel many, many miles. So
that is a logical step, and it's way better than it used to be, but it still seems to be like such an odd battle. The last thing is that I just didn't realize this in 2020, when we were all working from home and everything. We were doing a lot of online things, taking part in home and dinner events, and they got together with a lot of other companies to get all this data about how people worked, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's amazing working from home." And it's like, if you earn over 60K a year, you probably have a room in your house where you can like call an office, and you have a dedicated workspace, and you can do that work from a laptop, and it's really easy. And the amount of people, like when we were younger, Phil, and we all shared a house, can you imagine like 4 guys working from home for a year in lockdown? And so many people are in that situation.
Yeah.
And they don't, they're like doing service calls from their bedroom because they have nowhere to go. And it's not this, it's just not as cool as it's made out to be by some people. Anyway, where can we find you online, Phil? And where's the best place I don't know where the best place to connect is, but where's the best place to connect?
Well, the best place to connect with me as a LinkedIn person is LinkedIn, obviously. I'll spell my surname, that might help. So it's SZON, SZOR. It's not the easiest. So pop that into your search bar on LinkedIn. And my DMs are open as well, so you don't feel like you've got to connect with me. You can just send me a message if you want to say hello.
That's how I find you in everything. For all the time we've known each other, just put SZ and you're the first person that comes up.
I'm taking ownership of those letters. They're mine.
So thank you for your time and attention today, folks. If you go to the links in the show notes, we can link to Phil Szomszor and everything he does there. And there's also a link to the LinkedIn co-working group. Take part in that. There's European Co-working Day coming up on the 14th of May, and we're talking a lot about that. We talked here about how getting together in your local area and making your co-working space more visible to your local community, and that is the main point of organising an event in your co-working space in European Co-working Day. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.